Hello and welcome to the Cameo Show. I'm your host, Cameo, and we are joined by my favorite husband and co-host.
I'm the favorite husband.
You know what I meant. Mr. Greg Braun, everybody.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe it's Wednesday already. And here we are with another exciting episode.
Every Wednesday. Today we're going to tackle some of the biggest relationship myths out there. This information is courtesy of the Gottman Institute, which we refer to a lot as we talk about relationships and marriage. And this is stuff that you've probably heard a million times, but some of it might not actually be true. So we're going to go through and kind of do a Mythbusters kind of thing, like a true or false, true or trash kind of thing.
And I'll probably be wrong about all of them.
well, we'll see. We'll see.
Can I start with the dad joke though?
Oh gosh, yeah, please do.
You're ready to just get right into it.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So why don't watermelons get married?
I don't know.
Because they can't elope.
Very good. Very good. True or trash? No, just kidding. Number one relationship myth is that marriage is just a piece of paper. Yes or no? True or false? What are your thoughts?
Well, it is a legal binding contract, I guess.
Yeah. I suppose between two people that says we're going to be together, and if you leave me, I'm taking half your shit. Unless you have a prenup, that's a whole other episode. I know nothing about prenups.
Yeah.
But I mean, to me, that begs the question of how do people view marriage and the sanctity of it and the seriousness of it? Like, oh, it's just a piece of paper. Like, I can just wad that up and throw it in the trash. And it's like, well, that's probably not the right way to view it. And based on Gottman Institute, it shouldn't be treated as such.
Yeah. It's definitely a living, breathing, functioning thing. It's like a entity of itself that needs love and care and so it's definitely more than just a piece of paper.
Yeah, we're moving on. I don't like that one.
Yeah.
But it's on the list, so I'm mentioning it. But number 2.
Well, can I just say it gets people thinking past, well, I'm married, so checklist. Everything should just kind of take care of itself. And it's like, yeah, that's just when the work begins,
Yeah. I think that's just kind of dependent on whoever the person is, their attitude toward almost anything in life. If marriage is just a piece of paper, you probably think the stop sign's just a suggestion. You know what I mean? Kind of laissez-faire about everything. So
yeah, okay.
I can appreciate that it's on the list, but
yeah,
we're moving on.
We're moving on.
Number 2, living alone with occasional relationships is a lifestyle choice that is equivalent in terms of life outcomes to being married.
I don't really understand that one.
I don't either.
Skip it.
I think what they're saying is if you choose to live alone, you will live a healthy life just as if you live with your spouse or in a relationship where you have another person as part of your ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And it says myth, in epidemiology, social epidemiology shows that people who live alone die sooner, are less healthy, less wealthy, and recover from illness slower than people who are married, especially men.
Yeah.
Because they have a worse social support network than women.
I could agree with that.
I mean, I can see the majority.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that is a blanket statement for everyone. I'm sure there are plenty of people who live alone their entire lifetime and are healthy and take care of themselves and have a social network that's healthy. And, maybe there are plenty of men who have healthy social networks and women who don't. So grain of salt, but I guess as a majority, I can see that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 3, this one gets a little... This one gets a little...
This one got you dancing.
I guess
this one gets a little...
Well, anytime the word conflict is in the title, it starts making you think a little bit.
Starts cha-chaing.
Yeah, it means I'm going to have an opinion about something.
Oh, okay.
Conflict. But true or false, conflict is a sign that you're in a bad relationship.
That is false.
Is it?
Hold on a
Are you
second.
sure?
Wait,
Conflict is a sign that you're in a bad relationship.
that's false.
Yeah, totally false.
But I can see how people might view it that way, that everything's great. We never fight about anything. Everything's just hunky dory. And that would basically indicate that one person dominates and the other one just submits
Sure.
to avoid conflict,
Or that neither care enough
or there's
rock
not enough engagement in the
to create any
marriage.
friction.
Yeah.
Yeah, conflict is inevitable in all relationships.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Because when we have a conflict, if we do it in a healthy way, which we've had to learn how to do, it helps me understand you as a person better because there's a reason that you think something, understand something a certain way, feel a certain way that's different than me, that causes conflict because it's unfamiliar for me, that you get to parse through.
Yep.
Like it's an opportunity to learn and be curious more than anything. It's just our emotions get the best of us sometimes and we argue. And,
Yep.
as a married couple,
Yeah.
you're making big decisions. We're not always talking about trivial things either. We're talking about big decisions about finances and children and
Yep.
careers. And sometimes different ideas can present,
Yeah.
a little bit of friction.
Yeah. I think conflict, as we have learned on our journey in the beginning of our relationship, we just didn't know how to deal with each other. We didn't know how to handle conflict, and I didn't know how to handle your energy, and you didn't know how to handle my energy. And so, we did it the best way we could, but that's one of the things that going to therapy taught us was how to communicate and deal with conflict that will inevitably come.
Right.
As you said, life's full of big events and big decisions, and when everything's hunky dory and there's no issues, everything's fine. But when the rubber hits the road, that's when you get to see the depth of the relationship and find out, like, oh my gosh, we got to, how do we get through this?
Yeah.
And knowing how to communicate and handle conflict has been a huge push in the right direction for our happiness and our marriage, I can say, because then it's like you have this confidence about you that, like, I don't care what is thrown in our lap or what comes up, we will get through it together. We will,
Yeah, you learn to trust each other in a way when you deal with conflict
yeah,
openly and transparently because you recognize that the other person might have big feelings or expectations that are different than yours, but that through practice and through evidence, you can always seem to come to some sort of compromise or agreement. This idea that one person always gets their way and the other person just submits. I mean, I guess, again, depending on the person, might be what you're looking for. But in a healthy, balanced relationship, marriage, or any relationship for that matter, you're going to come across things that don't always line up that you have to learn to work through.
yeah,
And if you can't communicate about them,
yep,
dead in the water. Like it's going to show up conflict and
yep,
friction. You better learn how to communicate about it
yep,
and decide when it's worth communicating about it
right,
and when it's not.
yep.
Yeah. What was that thing you sent me the other day about, like, I've eliminated a lot of conflict in my life by recognizing that unless someone
Oh yeah, unless someone is paying me to fix their problems, I don't need to
chime in.
I don't need to voice my opinion about it if they're not paying me to,
Yeah.
it's like, wow, that's a pretty freeing statement, because how
Yeah.
much stuff do you worry about that it's like there's nothing you can do about it,
Yeah. And that may not pertain to a marriage or a relationship or a close relationship, but also great advice to live by
Great
because it's
advice.
like
Yeah.
everybody has an opinion. It's just not always necessary to share what that is.
Yeah.
We've talked about that a few times.
Yeah.
A whole episode about opinions and assholes.
Yeah.
All right, number 4, moving on. True or false? I'm interested in what you have to say about this one. Love is enough.
False.
Why?
You could be in love and willing to do whatever it takes. But if the other party is just unavailable and they don't want the same thing, or, then it really doesn't matter. You have to have, it's a buy-in on both sides.
Yeah. You're probably right. And according to the Gottman Institute, you are. Love is enough is a myth because in most marriages and relationships, people are courting each other, romanticizing each other, and then life happens, baby comes,
Yeah.
career changes, big stuff. And you love each other, you care about each other, but the other stuff gets in the way. And
Yeah.
then roommate syndrome kicks
Yeah.
in, or your marriage starts to feel like a checklist. So that doesn't mean you don't love each other. It just means that the other things are no longer in focus
Yeah.
and not being tended to. And those things can be enough to break a marriage if
Yeah.
they're not worked on, even if you still love each other.
Yeah.
Love is a feeling, and
Yeah.
these other things are effort, right?
Yeah. You can love your garden and have, this big fantasy and vision about it, but if you don't tend to it and weed it and, put good stuff out there and make sure it's always being watered, it's not gonna thrive.
Right.
It's not gonna yield any crops.
I like to believe that, love can heal everything. And
Yeah.
I do somewhat, but I just think that love is probably the foundation for the work
Yeah.
that has to ensue. Love is what keeps you focused on making sure you do the work.
Yeah.
But if you don't do the work, love will not keep it there, keep it together.
What is love?
Is that where?
Baby, don't hurt me. No.
Oh no.
No, but what is love to you? I mean, like,
Love is a feeling of safety and confidence and energy.
yeah.
No.
It's definitely a feeling, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
Isn't that wild?
yeah, and it's interesting when you ask that question. I am not even sure how to answer it, and I would.
Because it's a gut feeling. There are no words, you
Right.
know?
We say it. We use that word so much. Love you. I love
Mhm.
you. I love that. Oh my God, that's so great. I love that. I love coffee. Well, what do you mean you love it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Some things you love, some things you don't like. You hate,
Yeah.
and it's all just the feeling that you get. So it's kind of interesting.
Now I'm stuck on what is love.
Baby, don't hurt me.
Dad joke number 2. You snuck one in there. Okay, number 5. Talking about past emotional wounds. Moons. Talking about past emotional wounds will only make them worse.
I can see how that would be. People would think that's true, but I would say that that's definitely false.
False,
Yeah.
according to the Gottman
Yeah.
Institute. Again, all subjective to what people's perspective is for sure. And I can agree with you. I can see where that could be true, that it only makes it worse. But
Yeah.
in a healthy relationship, kind of back to that communication conversation, I can't understand where you're coming from, especially when it's coming from an old wound that maybe has nothing to do with
Yeah.
me, but gets projected onto me if we don't communicate about it,
Yeah.
if I don't understand where you're coming from and why. And then when I do, and vice versa in our marriage, and we don't always get there really quickly. Sometimes this is like an ongoing evolution, not sometimes, all the time. We're
Yeah.
constantly learning and evolving. But when I finally do understand where you're coming from, it's a lot easier to see you with empathy and compassion than it is frustration and anger and contention,
Yeah.
you know?
When you talk to somebody, you're talking to their triggers.
Yeah.
They're having emotional reactions and responses to things that you say. You could bring up a topic that's very sensitive to somebody and they immediately go into the red zone, as an example.
Yeah, that's a visceral reaction sometimes too, where people don't even know their body is just doing it.
Yeah.
Like we had something come up recently and we were talking about like knowing and understanding and being able to think about it and talk yourself through it, but also at the same time, like your body knows, like your body
Yeah.
feels it. And that's a visceral reaction where people maybe start sweating or
Yeah.
start feeling that like rage build up in their cork ready to pop.
Yeah.
And they aren't in control of it. It's not a conscious thing.
Yeah.
It's a subconscious, deeply rooted
That's why this is all so hard because it's all like
science.
it's all kind of like primitive feelings and but the whole point of being safe talking about old wounds and old traumas is because that way you can work through it in the future if something comes up. I mean, it's not like you're just reliving these things just to do it.
Oh, right.
It's like it's the same as like if you owned a business, you'd be like, where are my potential issues? And if
Or
you're too
deficiencies or what happened
yeah,
in the past that I need to be
and how
cognizant of.
and that's a very safe thing to be like any successful business person would be like, yeah, a very valid question. I'm always asking myself, what am I missing here?
Yeah.
What am I missing here? But why wouldn't you feel that way about your marriage? Like, what am I missing here? Talking about these things.
Well, because feelings and emotions are vulnerable and they're also very personal.
Yeah. But it's like it seems so obvious that you would want to
Yeah.
and not bury your head in the sand.
I think sometimes people want to, they just maybe don't know how to.
Yeah. We didn't. So
Well,
we
exactly.
literally went and learned. I mean,
And even still to
yeah.
this day,
And are learning.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like hard conversations are always hard. You
Yeah.
might get a little better at approaching them, but they're always hard.
Yeah.
And understanding our own emotions is very difficult. So understanding our spouse's emotions is even more so, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
So yeah,
talking about past wounds is a healthy thing to
absolutely.
do.
Yep. And you know you're getting to a good place when you can talk about past wounds and they don't trigger you and you don't feel anything about them. It's just like talking about a Netflix show you watched last night and it doesn't become a personal tragedy that you've experienced. That's growth.
Yeah. I also think just one more thing that popped into my mind there is that like it's really difficult sometimes to recognize in ourselves when we're being triggered by something that hurts us. So if our spouse is aware of that existing, maybe not in the moment, but even at another time, it would be helpful and is often appropriate to bring that up and say, like, maybe you were having that reaction because remember that time you shared with me about this happening, or this person said this, or even from your childhood, that your spouse then is able to say, maybe that's what made you feel that way in that situation. And then you're able to disconnect from it emotionally a little bit and look at it with a little bit more like separation
Yeah.
and distance and be like, oh, yeah, wow, okay,
Yep.
that was reminiscent of that time.
Yep.
But if your spouse was unaware of those types of things that were impactful for you, you might continue on being frustrated. Your spouse is frustrated because we don't understand why this is happening or why it keeps happening, or
You're just like, why can't you be normal?
said every wife to every husband. No, I'm just kidding. All right. I like this one. I think you could do an entire episode on this one. True or false? Better relationships are ones in which people are more independent and less needy of one another.
Okay, say that again.
Better relationships are the ones where people are more independent of and less needy of one another.
I mean, I feel like that's just preference.
We could talk about this for an hour because I think you can get into the conversation of interdependence in one another versus codependence in one
Yeah.
another. You can talk about being independent and still having your own space and time to explore your own hobbies, but then also being like respectful and connected to your spouse in ways that seemingly compromise your independence. Like,
Yeah.
you know? So, Gottman Institute says in great relationships, people try to meet each other's needs and they adopt the motto, when you're hurting, baby, the world stops and I listen. So, more of a like, we're a team,
Yeah.
and that interdependence is what a relationship is all about. That in a healthy relationship, we flow.
Hmm.
And it's not about maintaining my individuality so much so that it causes a wedge.
Yeah.
It's healthy to have your own things, sure. But I feel like, again, in my opinion, and I'm curious what yours is here, but like that, if left unchecked, can cause a lot of conflict and friction because one person then kind of inadvertently deems their independence or their preferences or their interests as more important than the relationship,
Yeah.
or it completely ignores that the relationship is also its own living, breathing thing.
Yeah. I just think that one comes back to balance and common sense because what's right for me might not be right for this other person or this other person. And as long as I'm taking care of me, you're taking care of you, and we take care of the marriage, those are the three
Mm-hmm.
the three things that when those are all happy and healthy and in synchronicity, things just happen and flow, and there's no, there's nothing that we can't get through and deal with. And
But the central message of what you just said is that you treat the marriage like it has its own separate needs, and you're not just focused on maintaining your independence.
mhm,
You're focused on making sure that everything flows, which is interdependence upon each
yeah,
other. Codependence is a completely separate conversation and topic, but we talk about this often. Like, we spend all the time together. We work
yeah,
together, we work out together, we parent together, we drive together. We are together almost all the time. But I still feel very independent in my thinking and in the things that I enjoy doing. And I just feel very lucky that I get to do a lot of those with you, that we share the same interests.
mhm,
Where to an outsider, or in some cases, it is codependence, where like I can't do things without you
yeah,
versus choosing to.
yeah.
And
Again, preference.
yeah, I think if someone is really extremely needy and that falls into that codependence, like you need me, you're expecting me to carry a lot of the heavy parts of this relationship. That's a major, you know, point of contention for people because it's too much pressure. So I would say that a better relationship is one where people are less needy, but not in the way of like being shut down and not open with each other.
Yeah,
Back to flow. Flow feels like the right word
yeah.
for that one. These are like kind of heavy.
That's a heavy one.
Some of them are kind of dumb too. Like this one feels dumb to me. Ready? Number 7, true or false? If you have to work at communication, you are not soulmates.
False.
Duh.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gottman Institute. I respect everything you present, but this one makes me a little.
Well, because people might think if it's right, it's right, and I shouldn't have to work at it.
I don't got to work that
Yeah,
hard. Well,
right.
you do. You have to
Yeah,
work. Newsflash, you have to work at everything, no
yeah.
matter what. Welcome to life. Like everything is work.
Yeah,
It's just how you view the work that is in front of you. Like,
yeah,
what kind of mindset do you have around the work and what the purpose of the work is?
yeah.
All relationships require work in big, bold print. Well, maybe it's not that obvious.
Obviously not.
All right. Well, next, this one's kind of like in the same vein. If a relationship needs therapy, it's already too late.
I can see how a majority of people would feel that way.
Majority, ready? Big stat. There are 900,000 divorces a year in the US. I don't know what the date of this is.
It was updated in 24.
Okay, so
So
that's
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
pretty darn
Almost a million.
accurate.
A million a year.
And fewer than 10% of the couples that divorce ever talk to a professional. So most people do feel like what you just said, that it's true. That if we need therapy, it's already over.
Yeah. Which is kind of silly.
Yeah. I mean,
You know?
therapy saved our marriage.
Yeah.
And we were going to therapy and then had like a big event happen that was like catastrophic. And if we hadn't already been going to therapy and continued going to therapy, we would be one of those statistics
Yeah.
for
Easy.
sure.
Easy.
But we chose to put our egos to the side reluctantly and, sometimes, and go do the work with a professional and get rid of the bullshit stigma that therapy is weak and therapy is if you have a problem and all of the things that are associated with the idea of going to therapy.
I mean, I get it. We are very prideful creatures. We think we're right about a lot of things that we're just wrong about.
We.
We. No. But oh my God. It's kind of like I can easily say it's like an owner's manual. Like you've got to like know the rules of the game. It's like trying to figure out how to play a complex board game just through trial and error, and you might get lucky with some stuff, but if you really want to know how to fast track things and how to really
move a little bit more effortlessly and
Yeah.
happily around the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a no-brainer. It's almost like should be like something that people do in the very beginning, like, okay, fine, we're gonna take this to the next level. We should just like as a precautionary, like what's the word? Proactively.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, it's all about communication.
Yeah. If we weren't so prideful and there wasn't a stigma around therapy, which I do think I feel personally, and maybe this is just my vantage point or what's in my orb and center of influence, but I feel like therapy is definitely becoming destigmatized and people, especially in younger generations, are starting to recognize it as something that's necessary with mental health on, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know the stats. I'm not an expert in any of this relationships. I just have the experience to speak from that's relevant because of our experience. But like if we would simply put more emphasis and focus on communication and on being able to express ourselves, even our deepest, darkest, most shameful things in an effort to start anew
Yeah.
for ourselves, release ourselves from the grip that that can sometimes have on us with a professional who knows what tools to give you and what guidance to give you,
Yeah.
we'd be so evolved just as a population.
Yeah.
And that would then obviously impact our divorce rate and our relationships.
Yeah.
We're just so quick. We're impulsive and quick to chase the things that are easy and bring us quick hits of dopamine that like therapy is just there's nothing sexy about it. So
Well, it admits that I have a problem. It admits that I might be wrong. And there were times in our experience where the look on your face when something was said that you thought you were right about, and she would be like, "Do you hear him?" And you'd be like, and the same with me, like,
that
there
must not have happened very often
yeah.
because I don't recall.
Pretty frequently. No, I'm just but,
No,
like
I do.
but there were times the same with me and where to hear an unbiased third party sit with you and your spouse and look at you in the eye and say, "Do you hear her?" Like, I'm so stubborn in my male brain of like, "But that's not what it is, that's not the right." It might take 10 minutes for it to sink in and be like, "Okay, I get
Or
this."
the whole week, and then you
Yeah.
go back to the next session
Yeah.
and you're like, "Wait,
It
I
makes
can
sense
see that
now.
now."
And then where, like, you had that situation that was a big conflict, after you then have these tools, you can look back at it and be like, "Duh.
Yeah.
Duh, that wouldn't even be an issue now." So that's how you grow and get better and evolve and,
Right.
or you don't.
And I can see, like, it's often easier to see in others things that are going on when you're not emotionally attached to it. So we talked about that earlier, like, as we're discussing our old wounds,
Yeah.
right? The same applies for, like, you can look at your, cousin's relationship or marriage or your parents' marriage or your best friend's marriage and see things from the outside. And a lot of times that's just your own interpretation or opinion.
Yeah.
So that's not exactly what we're talking about here, like having a unbiased third party,
Oh, yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. Not a family
like
member.
an
Yeah, yeah.
actual
A
professional
professional, yeah.
who is trained and understands these things,
Yeah.
has studied them to be able to be unbiased, but also to not inflict their own opinion. So like
Yeah.
those two things are not the same, but they are
Like,
equally as important.
for us, when we first went to therapy, I mean, we should by all means be a statistic of divorce. We should
Oh my
be,
God.
right?
Yeah.
So, but in those rawest times, being in a room doing work, you just feel like a wild animal in there with your emotions, and you're like, I know I'm right, and you're like, I know I'm right, and it's like there's such a conflict about it. No shit, you would get divorced because it's like there's just no way,
If there's no one
no
there to
way,
tell you, "Hey, your ego is leading," you're sure as hell not gonna take that from me. Like,
no,
you're not gonna hear me say
yeah,
that
yeah,
and be like, "You're right.
yeah.
It
Oh,
is
you
my
know what?
ego all charged up."
I just now realized it. I'm just being an asshole.
But when the professional sitting across from you says, "Hey, you're that's your ego jumping in to protect you. Like, you're
Yeah.
getting all charged up about something, but
That's not what she's saying to you. Yeah,
you're
yeah,
hearing it
yeah,
differently." again, it might take you 10 minutes, it might take you the whole week, but you're definitely more attuned and apt to
Yeah.
take that information and digest it.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's just me battling you.
Yeah. That's another big important thing is like who you get your information from is so important, especially in this day and age. Oh.
There's so many sidebars. We should have
Oh.
dissected these one at
But
a
but
time.
seriously, if you get the wrong information and you just run with that wrong information your whole life, like, nope, this is it. And it's like, ah,
Yeah. The best thing I heard recently, and I don't know what exactly was said, but the sentiment is approach everything with curiosity.
yeah.
I love curiosity. I love the word curious. It makes me think of Alice in Wonderland when she's like, curiouser and curiouser. And it just makes me feel all warm and like a little kid because I love Alice in Wonderland.
Mm-hmm.
Not the point. But just if you lead with curiosity, then there is no ego. There is no right or wrong. You're just simply exploring.
Yeah.
And there's so much freedom in that. And so that's what the therapy journey is all about. And we kind of are on a sidebar here because the point was if you need therapy, it's too late. False. But
That's when it begins, when you go to therapy.
if you're not being proactive and you wait for a problem, then yes, that's
Yeah,
when it begins
that's
with
day
therapy.
one.
But like, it's
Up to
definitely
that point, you were just flying around the board game with no rules, just like, what are we doing here? I don't know. But when you go to therapy and you both go and like, we're gonna do this. That's day one of the work. That's day one of going to the gym and be like, I'm ready to get in shape.
yeah,
Let's get our marriage in shape. I mean, why is that so difficult though?
stigma.
Yeah, that's wild.
And maybe because it's not equitable.
And
Therapy is not an available option for everyone. Now, I will say that obviously there are plenty of resources and there are resource centers and there are free programs and there's a lot of online support these days. Maybe there were 20 years ago and I didn't know. So I'm not saying that it's not available for everyone, but nothing is. You could even say that about the gym, that not everyone has the
yeah,
ability to,
sure, there's
yeah.
outliers and things that are outside of.
The big thing is stigma, I think. I
Yeah.
think it's just too hard to face the idea that I might be
wrong.
the cause of some of my problems. Like and I'm going to go pay somebody to tell me that. Fuck that. It's easier to just not and then forget it, that's my opinion. We're huge advocates of therapy if you can't tell. So sorry for that little tangent, but okay, moving on. Brace for impact.
Okay.
Number 9, true or false? Couples fight most about these 3 things: sex, money, and in-laws. True or false?
True.
I would say true too if you were asking me and I didn't have the answer in front of me, but according to the Gottman Institute, it's false.
Really?
Well, when I say the answer, I'm going to say it's loosely false. Here's why. The answer is that the one thing couples fight most about is actually nothing. That they're conflicts that pop up because they
Oh.
are failed bids at connecting.
Yeah. Okay.
Or conflicts that pop up because of outside stressors.
That's a trick question then.
I agree. That's a loose false because couples fight a lot about sex, money, and in-laws.
Yeah.
Because they're emotional and they're heavy and they're difficult to discern the right thing or the wrong thing. It feels like there's an answer to how much, how often, who, when, where, to all of those things.
Yeah.
But I would agree that nothing seems to be.
But on an average week, the average week of bickerings or, the average week of little arguments and spats, it's about, we're late. Shut up. You're the one that made us late,
Yeah. Yeah. The more frequent.
Yeah.
The deeper rooted are the others.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I would argue, or at least lend my opinion here, that like those 3 big things are underlying things that bubble that then create those small moments of nothing.
Exactly. It's if those are festering underneath the surface and unresolved and tension around, and then you're
Yeah.
just like the little things make you snap. Yeah. So
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that's
N-
interesting.
Number 10, all relationship conflicts can be resolved. True or false?
I'm gonna say false. I agree that you should work through things and deal with stuff, but some things are best left alone. Like some things you just accept about the person and be like, you know what? I'm not trying to change them. This doesn't really affect me too much. It doesn't really affect my marriage too much. It's just a little quirky thing that they do, and if you kind of feel like it's not that big of a deal, it's kind of like let a sleeping dog lie.
Yeah, it says exactly that. It's quite the opposite, that all relationship conflicts cannot be resolved, and most of them, 69% of them, are perpetual. But
What?
that was like the reaction of a 12-year-old
Yeah.
or maybe a 14-year-old
I've
when I
had a
said
po
69.
I've had a pot of coffee today, so
Yeah.
I'm just like,
But these conflicts
yeah,
are the little things that keep recurring.
yeah,
They're the things that require acceptance of personality differences
yeah, exactly,
so that you stop letting them become conflicts.
exactly.
They don't need resolved. They don't need to be fixed or changed. They
Right.
just are things.
Accept, move on,
Yeah.
focus on the big things, yeah.
Manage the conflict, communicate about it so that it doesn't become some big resentment fest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Personal awareness.
Personal space, which
There,
I impede on a lot, your personal space.
well, I just think again, it's a difference in personality. I'm an only child. You know, I tend to get a little squirmy when I feel like my personal space is being invaded.
Mhm.
And you're
I like hugs.
I'm like a cat, you're
Mhm,
like a lab.
mhm,
You like hugs, you like to be not touchy-feely, but like up in the space a lot and
mhm.
you know, I don't I love you and I don't look at that as a negative thing. It's just sometimes there's this acceptance between the two of us that like I can't have that right now
Yeah,
and communication about it.
yep,
And I'm not always great at communicating it very nicely. Sometimes I do snap still because I'm human,
yeah,
or sometimes your feelings get hurt because you're human, but in the overarching theme of things, you understand like, okay, we're just different in that area.
yeah, yep,
And I'm sure there are so many other little quirky things that people just accept and don't even think about in their
yeah,
marriages and with their spouse. I think the problem comes in when you start compromising who you are to appease the other person's quirkiness, like in a way that deteriorates who you are
yeah,
and causes resentment.
yeah,
That's a problem,
yep.
in my humble opinion. Number 11, all relationship conflict is the same. It is equal. It is all can all be approached in the same way.
Oh gosh. Are we keeping track of these of how many I've gotten right or
It's not about being right or
Oh,
wrong,
okay.
honey.
You're
This is
right.
just for fun.
Oh, you're right.
This is just for conversation.
Um, hmm. Well, the answer is clearly false because you've got to approach things differently. Things deserve to be handled.
Yeah, the severity of things is not the same. So, resolving the conflict of whose turn it is to do the dishes is a lot different than resolving the conflict of you didn't pay the bills and
Yeah.
you've been hiding money from me.
Yeah.
You know, it says some conflicts are deal breakers, and for those issues, compromise can be very difficult.
Yeah.
And suggests that you are very clear and hold strong in what your non-negotiables are in a relationship. And
Yeah.
I would challenge that as well because I think sometimes we think we know what we would do or we think we know what we want and what's non-negotiable until we're faced with it. I'm all for being clear on your own boundaries and knowing what you feel about something, but I'm also all for being open to the idea that you can reserve the right to change your mind because things may come up that you weren't expecting
Yeah.
and that you said if that ever happened, I can't recover from that, and then in the moment you press yourself and you find out that you can
Yeah.
in fact keep going, you
Yeah.
know. And I would challenge that because I think it goes back to that marriage isn't just a piece of paper contract.
Yeah.
if people were a little bit more open to the idea that maybe I can be a little more fluid and growing and learning with this person and evolving emotionally, it might not be treated like just a piece of paper you can throw away when shit gets hard, because shit gets hard.
Yeah.
Last but not least, compatibility. I just made up a new word. Is that a word?
I don't think so.
Well, it's not the word I was going for anyway. So the word that it was supposed to be is compatibility,
Okay.
is what makes relationships work. True or false?
I would say that's true.
Gottman Institute says false, that diversity makes relationships interesting, that we are not looking for our clones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Opposites attract. We find, let's see, what's it say exactly? Pheromones we find most sexy are from people most genetically different from us.
Isn't that weird?
Interesting.
So it's a primitive thing of like
Chemistry.
keeping the population gene pool
Mixed up
good.
Yeah.
So that's so funny. Wow.
Agreeability and conscientiousness are the characteristics that people really mean when they talk about compatibility. And it says these qualities are indexed by a person being able to say things like, good point, or that's interesting. You might be right
Yeah.
during a disagreement, but that it's not necessarily what makes a relationship work.
Yeah. That's a good one because I would agree 100% with that answer.
Yeah.
But the key being knowing that you're going to be attracted to someone that's different than you in a lot of ways. So working on that communication is what's really the key to a successful partnership.
Yeah, I
You
suppose
know?
if you approach it that way, like, I love this person, I care about them tremendously, but
Yeah.
there are things that they are completely opposite of me of,
Yeah.
and I can't handle it.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like a
obviously.
it's like a successful business. Like you got a marketing team and a sales team and a operations and finance team, and they need to be able to communicate together.
Yeah.
Or marketing's gonna go blow all their money at the golf outing,
Right.
and the accounting's gonna be like, "What the hell? We don't have any we don't have any money to count because we don't have any sales." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, both sides need each other desperately to thrive and
And
survive,
counterbalance each other.
and a marriage is no different. I mean, you can't both be marketing people. I'm just a horrible example, but
Yeah.
you get the idea.
Well, yeah, there are many times when, I mean, we are very much alike. We enjoy the same interests,
Yeah.
but there are many times when you present a completely different perspective than me that sometimes slash a lot of times makes me feel a little bit
Uncomfortable?
uncomfortable,
Okay.
angry. My ego comes in, I'm annoyed, but they're necessary because otherwise I might make dangerous decisions.
Yeah.
You help me see things that I wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, looking at it as like I appreciate the differences
Mhm.
and I'm not annoyed by it,
Yeah.
you know. But in the beginning, it was like, why don't you see things my way? That doesn't make sense to me. You're my wife. Why aren't you agreeing with me about this? And you're looking at me like, hey,
Yeah.
dumbass, why don't you see it this way?
Yeah.
Your version, you had more sass in my.
I don't That's not fair.
I know that's not fair.
No, I was kidding. It's true.
Yeah,
I was
full
totally
of
playing
sass.
like the victim, but
Yeah.
you're 100% right. It was way more sass on my side of the
Yeah.
table. So, biggest takeaways. Relationships take work.
Yes.
Period. The end.
Good night.
Conflicts are inevitable,
Yep.
but they aren't the end all be all. They aren't the enemy. Communication saves relationships. Therapy saves relationships. Proactive approaches to both of those save relationships. Those are mine. What are yours?
Uh, Communication is number one. Expectations number two.
Mm-hmm. Work.
Mm-hmm.
Not just it's a piece of paper and now we're married, so I'm your wife. Whatever you want to do,
Yeah.
just let me know.
It's kind of like it's not the destination. It's just when the work begins.
Yeah.
You know.
There are plenty of people who have successful, happy, functioning relationships without that piece of paper,
Yeah.
you know?
And without therapy.
Sure.
It's
Sure.
not like this is something that everyone has to do and you're a turd if you don't if you don't, you know.
And on that note, we've overcome a lot of big things, and therapy has been a major part of that. And we don't know what lies in the future, and no one ever does. So knowing that that's available to
Yeah.
help you navigate is so important.
Yeah.
Communication, hard work, therapy. You don't have to know how to do it all and get it all right. You actually have to be open to knowing that you don't know how to do it all.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of the conundrum?
Perhaps I might be wrong.
Or you might be right.
Or I might be. Well, I just want to say thank you for listening because it means a lot to us. We're very dedicated to showing up every Wednesday, especially you. And today was a really cool episode because these are all things that are helpful, relatable,
Yeah.
and Bill, our tailless Manx cat, has been watching us the whole time over there.
He's taking notes. Yeah. You know what I find most interesting, and then I'll close it down, and this isn't really about us. It's just more of an overarching thing that I think about. It's very meaningful to me when I receive messages from people who say like, "Gosh, you never know who you're helping. Thank you so much for doing this episode or mentioning this on that episode." A lot of times some of the stuff we talk about is just we've gotten so used to it being what we do or how we live or what we've learned, and sharing it to help other people, that you forget. But then that kind of recenters the focus for me. And I always am able to get more out of what I think I already know or what I've already shared with someone by them pointing out that it made an impact on them.
Yeah.
And I guess where I was going with that is that like conversations like today that are just kind of calm and just here's some information, let's chat through it.
Yep.
I mean, that's what we do. I mean, that's who we are.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's easier to receive listening to two normal people who aren't experts
Yeah.
talk about it, who just share what they've been through as it pertains to this information, than it is an expert. It can soften the pressure or the stress associated with feeling judged or, you know, like you're not doing it right by hearing other people talk about it,
Yeah.
and give you the courage then to seek out the expert or the
Yes.
therapist.
That's huge.
And
Huge.
so you're right. It is very important to us, and we enjoy it so much, and we're so grateful for you being here as the listener. And at the end of the day, if nothing else, that is always the goal, to give you the tools and the courage to empower you to go make these choices for yourself.
Yeah.
It's not to be right. It's not to educate you. It's not to say the way we're doing it is foolproof or we're never going to mess up or because we are
Yeah.
and we do. It's important to me, especially as my book is getting ready to be
Yeah.
released soon. The Reset Button, for those of you who don't know, I'm releasing a book in May of 2025. It's important for me to say that because in this platform, it can feel like you come across that you know everything, and I just
Yeah.
certainly don't claim to. So
Yeah.
this to me was like a very calm and refreshing conversation just to kind of revisit all these bullet points. And
Yeah. Yeah. This is like the meat and taters of a healthy relationship. I
yeah,
feel like these truths that can we just agree on these 12 things? Because if we can just agree that these are like the pillars of that therapy's not bad,
yeah,
that, it's all about communicate. Like if we could just start here and be like, we've been through this personally and we've been on both sides of the coin.
yeah. And
And
we've
these
been
are
through
true
it.
to us,
We've been through it a couple times
Yeah.
where maybe at first we didn't
Yeah.
understand the rules of engagement, and then it just perpetuated.
And how that felt.
Right.
And how it feels to understand these, it's like,
Right.
oh, okay. And what you said was huge. It's all about permission. One person gave me permission to go to therapy.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, someone that I respected that said, I'm going to therapy and it's really helping me. Here's their number. And it was like, thank you.
Yeah.
And I've paid that forward many times
Sure.
to people, but you too. So that's again why this is so awesome for us to be able to do this because it's powerful stuff.
Yeah. And so we appreciate you being here, whether it's your first time or you're here every week. Sometimes the topics may not feel like they relate to you, but it's meant to meet you where you are and to help in ways that might offer a new perspective, either from me or from Greg. Sometimes we don't always have the same perspective, which is also what keeps this dynamic interesting. So thank you so much for being here. New episodes every Wednesday.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time.